Okay. Welcome everyone to another week of our summer educational seminars. As you know, I am Artie. It is a little different for me being via Zoom instead of in the classroom, but at the same time, I think these panelist type ones are pretty good for the Zoom format because it's very easy to exchange questions. You can load up your questions in the chat for me to give to the panelists. And yeah, just pretty easy to coordinate. I only have a few announcements this week. The main one being that the alumni reception, remember tickets, please reserve them by August 1st. And for all of the interns and fellows on, the ticket is free. The event is for you to, celebrate, meet other alums of the program, and get some good eats and some quality refreshments, because I've already looked at the menu of the things we're going to order, and I'm already excited to have plenty of appetizers and hors d'oeuvres. So if there's anything to motivate you, delicious food is always one that gets me going to places. So I'm really hoping to see y'all there. Any questions, please email me and let me know. For interns, next week is going to be our evaluation session. This one is, in my opinion, the most important session of the summer because it's your opportunity to provide Pili with feedback. What went great, what went not so great, really any and all feedback. I really appreciate it, especially this being my first year. It'll really help me to make those changes going forward, know what went well, know what we need to change. And also I'm relying on y'all to give me the perspective of current law students, because I haven't been out of law school for that long, but things have changed culturally. And I would just like to know if there's any other issues that is relevant for y'all, ways for us to deliver programming, different types of events to do, social, professional, or otherwise, just so that way we can improve this program going forward. That's it for my announcements. And so let's go ahead and get going with the panel. This one is going to be on postgraduate fellowships, sort of how you can go about the application process and how our two fellows on the call secured their fellowships and how the supervisor supported them in the application process. And so in lieu of an introduction, what I'm going to do is go around. I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, the project that the fellows have done, discuss why you chose to pursue this fellowship in public interest law, and even why you chose to apply to the specific fellowship programs, or if you apply to all the fellowship programs, kind of, was there any differentiation between them when you were considering which ones to do? So I'll go ahead and start with you, Caitlin. So please, brief introduction, and then all the details about your project and how you went through the basics of choosing this organization and this project to do.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Caitlin Mulvert. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Skadden Fellow at Equip for Equality, which is Illinois' protection and advocacy organization for people with disabilities. We're a statewide organization and do a pretty broad range of work serving people with disabilities throughout the state. And my project focuses specifically on issues related to adult guardianship. So just as a little bit of context on that issue, adult guardianship is this system where a court appoints someone else. A court determines that an individual with a disability who's an adult who's reached the age of 18 is legally incapable of making decisions for themselves and appoints someone else, a guardian, to make decisions for them. We've in recent years seen a lot of data and issues around how this process for certain populations of people with disabilities tends to be kind of systemic in nature, where at age 18, folks, especially with intellectual and developmental disabilities, are overwhelmingly referred to full guardianship without considering less restrictive options. And then on our end, as an organization that represents the person with the disability themselves in these cases, we see a lot of issues that come up 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road where this guardianship order was put in place around age 18. Folks' lives have changed in fundamental ways over that time period. Their guardians' lives have changed, and we see a pretty broad range of different issues, ranging from guardians who are abusive or absent, simply out of the picture, to folks who are having guardianship stand in the way of, for instance, moving out of an institution, or getting other employment opportunities, kind of a pretty broad range of things. So my project focuses both on that back end of working with individuals with disabilities who have guardians and want to change or end the guardianship, as well as on the front end, we're working on doing more trainings and outreach and really helping connect folks with that broader range of options for folks who might need some kind of formalized decision-making support, but would be best served by options other than full guardianship. In terms of how I came to the fellowship specifically, I had the great opportunity to intern with my host organization while I was in law school still, in part of the time as a Pilley fellow, Pilley intern, excuse me. And so I had kind of been able to do work, including on a few different guardianship cases while I was still in law school, which is part of what led me to be interested in being able to really focus on this specific area of work for the first 2 years of my career out of law school. And fellowships, I think, are a really great way to be able to do some kind of more specialized work and really get legal experience working in the communities that you hope to serve moving forward.
Perfect, thank you. And Dominique, same question, basically, brief introduction, talk about your project, how you chose this particular project for a fellowship, the particular organization, and even why you chose your specific fellowship program if you only applied to that one.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dominique Mejia. I'm an Equal Justice Works Fellow at the National Immigrant Justice Center. So my project focuses on unaccompanied immigrant children applying for special immigrant juvenile status, which is a form of immigration relief for children who've been abandoned, abused, or neglected by one or both of their parents. And so this is a kind of a unique form of immigration relief that even within immigration practitioners, they don't really know about, just because it kind of actually involves both state courts, namely family courts, juvenile courts, and then also an immigration side. So my project actually targets a specific subset of this population. It's those that are 18 to 21, namely because under federal, so immigration law is federal, under federal regulations, somebody who is eligible, who has been abandoned, abused, or neglected, and it's not in their best interest to return to their home country, can actually apply until they're 21. But most states actually in the country kind of cap any kind of juvenile or family court proceeding at 18. And so that kind of locked out a lot of 18 to 21-year-olds who were in proceedings, who were in state care, who were in at risk essentially from kind of accessing maybe the stability, the immigration stability that would help them kind of stabilize other parts of their life. And so actually 2 years ago, partly because of the advocacy and policy work that my supervisor, Hillary Richardson, actually did, we did a change in the Illinois law. There was a change in the Illinois law that expanded the eligibility. And so now my project focuses on identifying, finding, and kind of advocating and informing the population of immigration practitioners, but also those who are eligible about the change in the law, and to make sure that more people those that are eligible are able to apply for this. So that's kind of my project in like a 1-minute elevator pitch. But I actually got to NAJC right out of undergrad. So I graduated in 2017 and I've been at NAJC ever since. So in different forms and different capacities. So I started out as a paralegal and then as a Department of Justice accredited representative, taking on clients of my own, but kind of running into a wall of, I was making these arguments or prepping up the filings under my supervision, but kind of like not actually understanding or knowing what was the legal basis and the legal arguments behind why somebody was eligible or why I was filing something in a certain way. And so that kind of just pushed me into going to law school. And so I went to law school with the intention of becoming an immigration attorney, and partly with the intention of coming back to NAJC. And so every summer I interned at NAJC. And then when it came time to kind of look at post-graduation, Hillary and I had a discussion about, what are my options, and we discussed a fellowship. And so that's what I did, and that's what I'm currently doing right now.
Perfect, thank you. And this one's going to be for the supervisors. So same thing, please introduce yourself, describe your organization a bit, the work that they do, and why these particular fellowships are a good fit for your organization, and even a little bit more of kind of how you assisted at that stage of it. And so I will start with you, Christina, and then we'll go over to Hillary.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I am a supervising attorney at Equip for Equality on one of our teams within our civil rights unit. Caitlin did an excellent job of describing our organization. I'll just say we have 3 units at Equip for Equality. One is our special education team, which works with children and families on their special education plans. Our civil rights team, which Caitlin and I work on a whole host of issues, from anti-discrimination issues regarding employment discrimination, public accommodations. And then our team is, we refer to ourselves as a community integration, self-determination team, where we help folks with disabilities access services, live in the least restrictive environment, as well as making sure their wishes and decisions are being respected and followed, which is where our guardianship work comes into play. And then we also have a criminal legal systems team, which works on the intersection of issues with individuals with disabilities who are involved in the criminal legal system. And yeah, so in general, oh, and then we have an independent monitoring unit as well, I guess I should mention. I don't think they generally have any post-grad fellows, but I know both our special education team and the civil rights team, we really value these fellowships, and it really helps us to provide us with resources to address and really target a particular issue that we might not otherwise have the resources to to handle and really address. And so I was not a supervisor on the team like Caitlin, in particular when Caitlin applied, but I know that this has particularly the issue that she chose to work on, adult guardianship issues, and trying to find less restrictive alternatives has been an issue that's sort of been at the forefront of our work for a long time, and trying to reform, try to reform some of the guardianship issues. And so we do receive a lot of requests from folks regarding those who want to terminate their guardianship, those who are having already have who have a guardian, but their guardian is not respecting their rights and following the rules, and they really have not considered less restrictive alternatives. So Caitlin has really helped us to improve and update our self-advocacy materials, and I think honed in on also some systemic issues that we've recognized and need to addressed more in our work and allowed us to do so. This project is also just like such a great fit for us at this time, like some changes in the law and supportive decision making, availability of this new law, which Kayla mentioned, with supportive decision making and helping us to do more trainings and outreach, to get the word out about that. So I think her project has just been such a great fit for our agency and especially for our team. And, I think her project just really exemplifies in general how useful these fellowships are for the Elite organization.
Thank you. Hillary, same question, just a little bit more about your organization, your role in helping craft the fellowship and kind of why these types of fellowships are a great fit for your organization.
Sure. I'm Hillary Richardson. I manage the non-detained kids team here at NIJC. NIJC overall is quite a large organization, and we do direct representation, policy advocacy, and litigation on behalf of immigrants, low-income immigrants in the United States. Our main focus is here in Chicago, but we also have offices in Indiana, in Washington, D.C., and we do work nationally through some of our litigation and policy initiatives. But Dominique's fellowship and my project is mainly focused here in the state of Illinois. She did a great job describing SIJS, or Special Immigrant Juvenile Status. And unfortunately, a lot of the kids that we work with are here because they've been abused or abandoned or neglected by one or both of their parents. So our small but mighty non-detained kids team works with those kids to help get them stable immigration status and protection from deportation. And as she described, we actually have, we end up working in the same venue as this project from Equip for Equality. A lot of our cases are in probate court. But instead of being adult guardianships, a lot of our cases are minor guardianships. And that's because if a child had suffered abuse or abandonment or neglect, they may be living with a non-parent and need that parent to petition for guardianship of them. And it's then the probate court that makes those specific findings that the child has been harmed and that it would not be in their best interest to return to their home country. And I think what's special about Dominique's project is she's focusing on this outreach. So as she described, there was a change in the law that we really advocated hard for and had a lot of really great champions in the Illinois state legislature that helped push this forward, that really expands access for young people living in Illinois to access the full range of relief at the full age of relief that's mandated by federal immigration law. So we see kids who are age 18, but under age 21, normally, if they were going to be subject to a guardianship, they would have to meet the requirements that the folks from Equip talked about, right? That they would have to be established to be a person with a disability or otherwise in need of that guardianship. Here, there's a special provision now in the Probate Act that says if they're seeking a guardianship for the specific purpose of seeking these findings of abuse, abandonment, or neglect for SIJS, they can still be considered a minor. So they'll be going to the probate court. They're over 18, but under 21, but they're still subject to the court's juvenile jurisdiction. So that's been really exciting. It has obviously been a little weird to explain it to the probate court judges who are used to this sort of binary structure, right? If you're over 18, you have to have a disability. And if you're under 18, here are the standards. Fortunately, we have a really great judge in the juvenile courtroom in probate court in Cook County. She's fully educated on SIJS, has been really great with these cases. And once we've explained the law and really advocated and used our pro bono networks as well to do some education to the bar sort of across the state of Illinois and the bench as well, we've had really, really positive results. But we know that because this is a new law and is somewhat unusual and sort of changes people's perceptions of jurisdiction, that there were going to be perhaps some challenges with implementation, both in terms of folks who may not understand the application and the required nature of hearing these motions and entering the findings, but also in terms of outreach directly to kids themselves. So Dominique's focus is really important, and I think special to our organization, because we have that technical support network, and we're very familiar with the whole history of the law here, and we have those outreach networks as well. So the next phase of Dominique's project is going to be reaching out to kids age 18 to 21 to make sure they understand that this is something that they can do if they're eligible. So I think it really, when Dominique and I talked about it, she was already very familiar with SIJAS, had been working with kids under the previous Illinois law for SIJAS, has additionally just like great client demeanor and skills in working with kids, particularly teenagers. I don't know if anybody here like has teenagers or works with a lot of teenagers. They're special. We love them. They can be their own special kind of challenging as well. So having those really like that ability to build trust and be serious and also set some boundaries when necessary are a really great set of skills that Dominique has. So she's a good fit for our organization and for the project. We're really excited to have her, and we're really excited to kind of see where this expands to help more kids apply for relief and that stability that they need.
Thank you, absolutely. And I have my oldest nephew just graduated high school, which also makes me feel strange. He's his own animal. And my eldest niece also just turned 13. And it is funny seeing that transition of personality when they hit teenage years. So that is an amazing skill, because even as the fun uncle, I struggle with that. So let's talk a little bit more about the general fellowship information. These ones are going to be for the fellows, and I'll kind of just keep this pattern going. We'll just bounce the fellow questions and then bounce back to supervisor questions that are in that same related category. So I'll start with you, Dominique. So what are the typical timelines for the application process? And how did you find out more info when you were looking into applying for one of these fellowships?
Yeah, so I found out through these fellowships actually directly from NIJC. NIJC has had a number of fellows in the past, both SCADA and EJW. So I actually applied to both, and I was applying to both of them simultaneously. As Caitlin, I'm sure will attest, SCADA usually is up first, and so you kind of have to submit that application first, and then you submit EJW. EJW for me was a little bit more extensive. It does require you to do like a timeline of every 6 months, what you're planning to do, you're planning to do in your fellowship. And so some sense I actually kind of started working on that one a little bit earlier than the SCADA one, but the SCADA one does do interviews first. The deadline is sooner, and you also find out sooner between about SCADA and EJW. So I would say that we probably started the end of July, beginning of August. I remember starting to have these discussions with Hillary and another supervisor at NAJC before starting the semester of my 3L year, and then doing multiple rounds of drafts between the three of us about, how was the fellowship going to be framed, all my supporting documents, letters of recommendation, and then even doing some practice interviews with that. So I would probably have to look back, but I think both probably got back to me by the end of October, I want to say, like fall, beginning of fall, because although EJW is a rolling basis, so I actually found out pretty early on that I got placed with NAJC and that I had a sponsor with United and Cyber Shaw. But I know we have another Equal Justice Works fellow at NAJC who didn't find out until May of this, like the same cycle. So that was different on the EJW side. Finding out more info. I think both websites were really helpful. They both had, although there's a large number of people who apply, I found both like coordinators or directors, I should say, very responsive to emails and to questions. And also there was a lot of alumni on both ends that were really willing to kind of like get on the phone or to email me some suggestions or even send me some of their notes from their interviews to kind of give some tips. So lots of different people were helping out with the application on my end.
Thank you. Caitlin, same question, timeline, kind of how did you find out more info, and kind of just what was your process in initiating the application and working with your host agency?
Yeah, so I, like Dominique, some also had applied to both, so was kind of working with the same deadlines, which is like early September for SCAD and then later in September for EJW for getting the application itself pulled together. I had some informal discussions with my host organization kind of in the early summer, since I was interning there over the summer, and had just kind of started to talk about the possibility of applying for fellowships. And then it was kind of midsummer, probably like end of June, beginning of July, that we were really trying to pin down like what the focus of a project would look like. And then it was probably end of July, August, that I was really working on putting together those, number of different drafts like Dominique mentioned. And in terms of ways to get info, I definitely recommend just checking out both of the websites for the respective fellowships, which have a really detailed guidance on the fellowships and what all they're looking for in applications. The EJW application is definitely more detailed than SCADN. And so I think I've kind of gotten the advice before that if you are applying to both, like start with EJW, because it's going to make you like really dive into the specific details a lot more, and then put the SCADN application together based off of those more nitty-gritty details that you've figured out for the other application. And then after the application is submitted for SCADN, at least, interviews happen in sometime in October, and then you end up finding out sometime in November. The exact dates will be on the website for what that looks like for this particular year. And yeah, I would just kind of echo also what Dominique mentioned about a lot of folks being really willing to just hop on a quick call or respond to emails. I definitely talked with a few different former fellows doing related work and putting together the application, talked to some other organizations that do work that overlaps with what my project now is. And I think that was not just helpful for the application, but helpful in terms of the actual project. Now that I'm doing this work, to already have had some of those discussions and built some of those connections for folks that have a lot of familiarity with different aspects that touch of work that touch on what I'm doing now.
Thank you. I did put links to the websites in the chat for everyone, so please take a look at those and just poke around there and see kind of what the details are and a little bit more. I know both of you alluded to having a relationship with your host organizations prior to applying for your fellowship through previous internship experiences and so forth during law school, and Dominique, in your case, even prior to. Is there any other advice you could give about, I guess, developing not just that relationship, but like how you sort of identified an area for your project? Like, how did you, how did you work on developing your project and sort of the interviewing process and working on that? And I'll just hop back to you, Caitlin. Any other details you can add on just how you selected your project and developed that relationship?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a very collaborative process of both combining, both just some discussions about like what I had personal experience with. I had been able to do some work even before law school with a different organization back in Indiana, where I'm from, on issues related to guardianship. And so I think it was kind of talking about the combination of like what I had experience with and what the organization was seeing, needs in. As Christina had highlighted, we do get a lot of, new intake requests from folks that are looking for assistance with guardianship. And we thought it could be very useful to be able to have more resources devoted to being able to work on those cases and really focus on those issues. And so I think it was just a lot of like back and forth as to like what's what the organization would benefit from, what I'm interested in and have experience with. Also, just I think I'm definitely aware that a lot of other fellows have very different experiences in how they got connected with the host organization. So I think it's definitely not everyone has this same pathway that Dominique and I sort of have, of having actually worked with the organization in some capacity first. Some organizations put out like more formal postings, almost like a job posting that says, hey, we're looking for fellows. Sometimes they even say, hey, we're looking for fellowship candidates to focus on this specific area. And then I also know folks who got connected with host organizations in more informal ways, just like, I'm interested in the work that you do. Can we start a conversation about this? So I think there's lots of different ways to potentially get connected with potential host organizations.
Thank you. Dominique, same question. Just go ahead, and any other details about how you cultivated your relationship with your host organization, and sort of how you, drawing a blank here, words fail me sometimes, and this is one of those books, but yes, just more information about how you cultivated that relationship and developed that application.
Yeah, so I think the figuring out what my fellowship would be was just from the work we were doing, like direct work. I just remember as a paralegal, we would have to turn people away. We'd hear some really horrible and cases of children who were very clearly eligible if they were not in Illinois, and that was very heartbreaking to kind of have to break that down and have to turn people away. They would be 17 and a half or 17 and 3/4, and the fastest we could probably get a case in was sometimes like 3 months, or if we have to go to publication, that would take an extra 30 days. And so it's really heartbreaking, especially because that immigration status is a big deal, and so having to turn some of those away. And so I think Illinois is kind of leading immigration advocacy in some ways, but we very much looked at other states who had already made this change, who had expanded eligibility to 21, and Hillary at that point, and other advocates were very much like, let's change the way that Illinois runs these things, and so that we can make sure that everybody who's eligible can apply. And so I was in law school when this change was happening, and so it kind of happened from one summer to the next. One summer we're having to reject people out, and then one summer it's like, no, now we can help these people, and let's make sure let's try to find those people that we had rejected prior, and can now reach out to them and say that they're now eligible. So that's been kind of part of just like direct work, and those interactions with clients is kind of what kind of pushed us to do that fellowship. And then also, I think honestly, just kind of being very frank, it's just kind of like nonprofit work, right? You don't have the money always to hire somebody. And so kind of being very, very frank with your internships, or wherever you're trying to look into getting hired, of like, they want to hire you, but they maybe don't have the money right now. And so fellowship option is the right way to go as an option. So I think for those that don't maybe necessarily have a connection with a organization, but they want to do this type of work, or they're interested in kind of creating a fellowship program with a partner organization, I think it's kind of just, let's put that on the table, just put it out there that that they would like to hire you, or would like to do this type of fellowship program, but can't at the moment. And to kind of offering yourself up as a means to being able for them to kind of accomplish something, not just you being able to accomplish something.
Thank you. This question is going to be for the supervisors. So Caitlin and Dominique have had longstanding relationships with your organizations, but I'm sure there are plenty of students on this call who may be interested in certain areas and maybe haven't worked at that agency or that organization before. So first, would your agency be interested in being contacted by potential fellows, or like actively seeking them? And then the second part is do you have any advice about how to develop a relationship with an organization that someone may not have interned with? And same thing, like how to present fellowship ideas to that agency if there isn't that longstanding relationship. And so I'll start with you, Hillary, and then I'll move over to you, Christina.
Yes. So the answer to your first question is yes, but it's like immediate. So right now, if you are rising 3L, please submit your application on NIJC's website like yesterday. Because as Dominique mentioned, it's right about now that we're trying to figure out kind of which fellows we want to be promoting and what type of applications we want to be asking for. So different organizations do it differently. NIJC for the past few years, I believe, has had a more structured process where we know that we depend on fellows. We get all kinds of fellows, not just EJW and SCADN, which have sort of similarly structured fellowships, but also there's an Immigrant Justice Corps program, there's Schreiber Fellows, and then we also are seeing more and more law schools, thankfully, kind of putting their money where their mouth is and providing law school funding for folks to really actively encourage them to do public interest work. So that being said, we have a process for fellows. We have an application online that just you submit your interest in NIJC. Generally, you submit your resume and a writing sample. And if you're familiar with any of the individual smaller projects at our organization, then we ask that the applicant put that information in their interest. Usually at that point, the individual projects at NIJC will kind of figure out amongst themselves, like, who is able to host a fellow and what kind of project they maybe will want to try to work out with that fellow. So for example, right now, my project gets to this year have a fellow that would be starting in 2024. And the proposed project that we've been thinking about is a school-based attorney. So very broad strokes, right? But we would be working with a proposed fellowship applicant to sort of flesh out kind of where it would be, what it would look like, what the relationships would look like, et cetera. Other teams at NIJC may or may not have as specific of an idea as that at any given time. But I think it really, if you don't know the organization, it behooves you to kind of research the organization itself to figure out the type of work that they're doing, but then really just as someone said previously, like offer yourself as a resource, see how your skills might match the work that the organization is doing. But as far as like specifics of a project, I think the organization is going to be the one with like the institutional knowledge and the relationships to be able to tell you like, yeah, this is a great idea, or here's an idea that we had, let's see how your skills can fit in with that, or this is a no-go based on, you know, these aspects or relationships. So I think really focusing just on your skills as opposed to a specific idea that you may have, unless it's based off of work that you've previously done with the organization. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Christina, same question. Just how does a student kind of reach out a little bit colder if they don't have that existing relationship, and kind of how do you guys welcome, I guess, those types of students reaching out before the application process begins?
Sure, yeah, we do. I think our ideal situation is to have someone who has worked with us before, but we do you know, accept folks and work with folks who have not had experience with us working before. I think that comes from our experience in, you know, with applying for these fellowships, that they often, you know, value when an individual has worked with an organization before. That might make their application stronger with SCADN and EJW, but it's not a requirement for us. We do also, like Hillary mentioned, we also, you know, are willing to explore other post-grad fellowships beyond SCADN and EJW. We have had, you know, folks with 1 year, or we prefer 2 year fellowship opportunities through folks' law schools and whatnot, but we have had folks with us for 1 year fellowships as well. We also have like a sort of a formal application process for us to, you know, continue working with you, and it's generally and folks are welcome to reach out to us beforehand. We've already collected those applications and are working through working through those now and making those decisions. But generally, we post our application for that in June and make a decision in July. So folks are, welcome to reach out in like early June or May if they, want to start talking to us beforehand or about whether, they might be a good candidate or have any other questions about our application process. I think for us, just in general, if you haven't worked with us before, it's stronger applicants have some, either professional or personal, connection to our work, and showing why they want to work with us. And it's not required that they have a particular project in mind. I know some people do and have a very specific project that they want to work on and are just, trying to find the right agency to do that. But folks just have like some general idea of issues that they're interested in, want to work with us and finding out what is the best fit for us and them. That's fine as well.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. It seems like existing relationships or existing connections, especially with these two organizations that have a more specific mission, helps. But I'm sure with other more general organizations, they have a little bit of a different process. It kind of just depends on, where the potential fellow wants to apply and kind of what experience they have. No, it's really helpful. Let's see, let me make sure I check the time. Okay, so we're gonna send this one back to the fellows. I guess this one is really about the applications themselves. So what tips do you have about crafting that strong application, specifically highlighting any experiences professionally, personally, that you feel may have helped and like shown up in the interview? And kind of same thing with like law school activities, like kind of what were the, I guess your highlights that you wanted to highlight in this application that you felt were helpful when you move through the application and interview process. So I'll start with you, Dominique, and then I'll move over to you, Caitlin.
Yeah, I think what kind of surprised me of the application process beyond, just what surprised me, I guess, was how much the interviews actually kind of more focused on how much I cared about my fellowship program and like why I was doing the work that I was trying to do, like why I was proposing to do this fellowship, why I wanted to do public interest law. And of course, it makes sense. I think both fellowships are focused on, public interest, making sure that, we are helping the community as a whole, and providing resources to be able to do this type of work. And so I guess it shouldn't have surprised me, but a lot of even kind of the framing of some of the questions and my responses on the application, but mainly in the interviews was, why are you doing this work? Why are you interested? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you see yourself kind of continuing this work after the fellowship timeline? And so I think for those that don't necessarily have experience with the organization or even with the type of work that they want to do in the fellowship, I think it's kind of focusing on your why. Like why is this interesting to you? Why do you want to do this? Why are you going to do this for 2 years or however long the fellowship is going to be? And so I think kind of figuring that out, not only for the interview, but also for yourself, what's pushing you to do this type of work. And for me, it's both personal experience, but also just like, direct experience, hands-on experience. And kind of what I focused on is that I'm doing this for 5 years already. So like, I know that this is what I want to do. I know what this work entails. I know what I'm going to have to do day in, day out. I can describe a week to you to like what I would be doing because I've already done this. And so kind of making sure they're both confirming that you are motivated and passionate about this work, but that you are also grounded and know what it's going to take to kind of complete your fellowship goals. So I'd say focus on that for the application, but also for the interview.
Thank you. Caitlin, same question.
Yeah, I definitely had some overlapping experiences kind of Dominique's perceptions of like how you can talk about how they kind of ask about like, why are you the person to be doing this work? But then I also think on the side of the details of the project, which is also a significant part of the application, I think just kind of doing your homework on what it is that you're proposing you'll be doing for the next 2 years. I think there's a lot of ways to do that based off of depending on what your project is and what organization you're working with. But, you know, maybe that's getting data from your organization to be able to flesh out and really describe what the issue is like looking like on the ground. Maybe that's being able to reach out to some other organizations that are doing related work and get their perspectives on what they're doing and how it relates to what you're proposing to do. Maybe it's doing a deep dive into, in my case, there's some legal developments around adult guardianship law. You know, looking into what other states are doing, just kind of really trying to, as you're putting together these applications, do a deep dive. If you haven't already naturally done that through the work that you might have done previously, to be able to really spell out like what the issue is, why this work is important, and why it's important at this current moment in time. And just really be able to provide through the application a good picture of what the situation is around the issue that you're proposing to work on for the next couple of years.
Thank you. This one's going to be for the supervisors. Essentially, what are the key aspects that you've seen of a strong cover letter, resume that made applicants stand out? And kind of, do you use those sort of application materials, resumes, cover letters when you're doing your initial interviews with potential fellows to kind of prepare them for the formal interviews with Skadden or EJW? I'll start with you, Christina, on this one.
Yeah, I think the kind of what I mentioned before, you know, if you haven't worked with, or regardless of whether you worked with us before, I think one thing that's, you know, unique about our organization is you know, we are, I think something that stands out is any work experience that you've had in working with people with disabilities or on any type of project, you know, related to the issues. If you have worked with us and we might not know about, really emphasizing that, or any personal experience that you might have. You know, normally in a cover letter or an application for a professional job, you might not, you know, talk about the fact that you have a family member with a disability, or that, you know, you yourself, you know, have a disability, or, you know, have what you've experienced. And so, you know, that is something that is, you know, that would, you know, we would want to know about, because it explains, you know, why you want to work with us, and, you know, why you might want to do this project. So, you know, that's one thing. Or, you know, if you've done any volunteer work, you know, that might also be something you could mention in your application. And if there is a particular, I think if folks do have a very particular project that they want to work on, just explaining like why that is, and why they came to that, you know, is good to know.
Thank you. Hillary, same question.
So I will say just quickly, because I've been reviewing a bunch of cover letters for a number of positions recently, the thing that stands out the most to me is actually not where you want to be, which is please proofread your cover letter. Like a lot, and I get it, because I've been on the job market and it's hard and you want to apply to as many places as possible to increase your chances. But the biggest way for me to put your application in the reject pile is if you have like some other organization's information, or if you have typos in your cover letter, if there's just indication that you are just not carefully reviewing this, that makes me think you are not that interested in this specific position or this specific organization. And that's a pretty big ding. It would be pretty hard to come back from that. So I know it's hard out there, but also please just look at it carefully. In terms of positive things, I'm looking for, similar to Christine, I'm looking for experience with either immigration law itself or specifically with the target populations that we work with. So any experience with kids, I want to hear about that. Even if it's like babysitting or nannying, you know, like we want to know as much as possible on paper that you can like vibe with the kids, that you can build trust and rapport and get information from them. Any experience that you have doing trauma-informed work at any level with anybody, again, whether that is in your personal life or in your professional life or volunteer experience, I want to at least see that you have like the perspective and the sensitivity to acknowledge that there are certain practices that you need to implement when you're working with people who have been traumatized, people who've experienced violence, abuse, etc. Those would be the biggest things in terms of experience specifically. And then I think the last thing would just be if you've, I'll look at your writing sample. In a law position, especially, like writing can be taught. So it's not as big of a ding if the like writing is less skillful as it would be if there's something where you clearly just didn't pay attention in your cover letter. But if you do have like a well-crafted writing sample and I can like hear your personal voice and your writing makes sense, like that's a big plus for me, even if you may not have all of the relevant experience, because then I can say, here's one thing where like maybe they won't need as much support. So those would be my big three.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, I got another question. This one's for the fellows. What are your plans after your fellowship? And I guess how do you plan to leverage your current experience going forward into your career? I'll start with you, Caitlin, and then I'll go over to you, Dominique.
Sure. So I'm currently just in the last few months of my first year as a fellow. So in terms of concrete plans, it's very much to be determined. I'm definitely very interested in continuing to do work in the disability community in some capacity. As to what that'll look like exactly, we'll see. But I think in terms of the value of the fellowship to whatever I end up doing after the fellowship, I think it's, regardless, going to be really helpful to have had a couple of years of focused legal experience, especially if I would continue doing work related to adult guardianship or in adjacent areas of disability related legal issues. Just having that first couple of years of experience and building connections and relationships with the communities that I want to continue working with, I think will be very valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah, so similar to Caitlin, I am just coming up on 1 year in my fellowship. I still have 1 more year. So I haven't had this discussion with Hillary or anybody at NAJC yet, but yeah, ideally I'd be, doing the same work. I went to law school to do this specific type of work, immigration and asylum work. And so I would ideally be still working with the same population, minors under 21, doing similar work, doing special immigrant juvenile status and asylum work, ideally at NAJC, but if not, it'd be, at another organization that would be doing similar work. So.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot here saying like, hey, please, but I know that I've had colleagues who've done these fellowships. Some have gotten hired on by their host organization, others have done work, but most of them stay in the similar area. It is just good to know that a lot of folks who do apply for these fellowships do it because they do want to stay in that field. And I know probably a couple, and it's been a similar issue, similar thing with them. So we have a few minutes left. I guess I'll go around to everyone. Just last bits of advice that you want to impart on anyone who's thinking about applying for this fellowship, or anything that you wish you knew prior to the process. I'll start with the fellows and I'll just cruise around to the supervisor. So Dominique, just any quick final thoughts of advice or things you wish you knew prior to the process beginning?
Yeah, I'd say for advice, kind of, I've been really thinking about those that don't have any connection with an organization or don't necessarily know what kind of fellowship plan they would want, project they would want to work on. I like was looking up my EJW on the EJW's website. You can actually search people by fellow class, and so you can actually find. I think each class is maybe like 150 fellows, and so on the website you can search by year. I think they go back by at least like 10 years, and so you can read up on different projects that people have had that are currently working on those different fields that they've done. And you can narrow it down by location, by project, by class year. And so I think it's a great resource to kind of like see what type of projects have been granted, but also different project ideas. And also we have, I think, our contact information on here. And so if you're ever interested in reaching out to getting advice about how to work something up, you can always reach out to them. And I think it's a helpful tool, even if you're not going to apply to EJW. I think that's just kind of like getting the fellowship experience as a whole. I think it'd be a great resource to look that up.
Thank you. Caitlin?
Yeah, my advice was actually going to be similar to Dominique's in that I just throughout the process was really surprised in a good way of how open folks were to being contacted, like whether that be former fellows or other organizations doing overlapping work. Just to hop on a quick call, see what information they have, what their experiences have been doing this kind of work. Folks are just so welcoming and wonderful in most circumstances. So just, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to folks and have those conversations, because chances are the folks that you're reaching out to will similarly be interested in connecting and seeing how their work might map onto what you're looking to do.
Thank you. Christina?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, and one thing I forgot to mention, that if your project has any potential to be like for pro bono partnerships, that's always good to include in your cover letter. And, also just including, like, I know some folks, don't know what they want to do in the long term, but emphasizing if, like, how this project or working at our agency, fits in with their long-term professional goals. But I'll otherwise just emphasize what Caitlin said. Like, I feel like we are just always willing to talk to folks and explore options and answer any questions. So, and I think that's pretty typical of most agencies. So, always feel free to reach out if you have any questions or trying to figure out at the outset whether, the agency might be a good fit for you.
Thank you. And Hillary, any final thoughts?
I think just the two pieces of advice that I always give would be work on wherever you're at, work on building genuine relationships with the people around you, no matter who they are, because that's what's going to help you to build networks in whatever position you're in. I feel like that's really important. That's been really important to my work. And then if you are at all interested in either immigration legal services or direct legal aid to low-income folks, if you don't already and you have the resources, learn Spanish. It's huge. That's all.
Perfect. That's great advice to end us on. So thank you everyone for attending. The recording of this will be made available on our YouTube. And if you have any follow-up questions, is it okay if someone reaches out to provide them with y'all's contact info? Perfect. So yes, if you have any questions or you want to get any other information, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll make that connection. So with that, another wonderful session in the books, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.